As a recruiter, here are some ways that I can recommend to you as a candidate to prepare for your next job interview. So, to start off, know your worth and know your value, okay? This is extremely important. So, first things first, step zero, you want to make sure you're going into an interview, preparing for the interview, understanding your worth, understanding your value, and walking in as confident as you can be, okay? You don't want to be walking into the interview, on some like Conor McGregor level of arrogance. I'm not saying that at all, okay? But you should definitely be going into the interview with a confident mindset, okay? And I think the best mindset, just for step zero with this, is to actually remember that you have been invited into the interview, okay? I think a lot of the time candidates, they walk into interviews, they feel nervous, they feel reserved, they feel conscious, they're like self-conscious, they're just overthinking their every move, they're really doubting their value, okay? Once you walk into that interview remembering that you have been invited there, you have gone through the screening call, they have had a look at your resume, they've had a look at who you are as a person, and they've understood how you communicate, and they think that you have what it takes to be that person for them, okay? So therefore, you should already be thinking like, you know what, I have value to give, okay? I've been invited here today, they see something in me, I need to take that on board. I need to take that confidence and run with it. Okay. So that's your step zero. Okay. Step one, you need to actually understand your transferable value. Okay. So it's all well and good having that confidence and that self love and having that mindset that, yes, I have been invited here today. I'm not just rocking up at a random, dropping off my resume. They think I have what it takes. So I'm going to walk in with that confidence. Okay. It's all well and good with that. But now you need to move with these specifics, okay? And so what's very important here is understanding your value, understanding the transferable skills, okay? So prepare before the interview how you have done what they're looking for in your past jobs, okay? So you should be creating a couple of stories to talk about your value, okay? You should be having a couple of stories ready to go that match the JD job, that match the job description skills that they're looking for. Craft a couple of stories that relate to those skills in different components, and then be prepared to talk about that when asked, okay? Don't go into the interview planning specific answers, okay? Go into the interview with the mindset of thinking of maybe 2 to 3 different stories on how you have demonstrated all the skills that they're looking for in their ideal candidate. And then when they ask about the specific skills or ask about a time that you did a certain thing, you're able to take a certain part of the story. Okay, but the core of this teaching is to understand your value. Okay, understand genuinely how you can be the missing piece of their puzzle for this interview. Okay, so understanding that mindset very early on and understanding the legitimate proper value that you are going to add to the team and practical value is extremely important to know before you walk into that job interview, so you understand who you are and you understand when you're talking what kind of answers you need to be, what kind of questions you need to be answering, okay? Secondly, okay, do your research, all right? So when you're going in for these interviews with these people, you need to actually understand a little bit more about the company, understand the hiring manager, and understand the vision, okay? So don't go into the interviews, and this was a mistake that I used to make when I was at my casual job trying to get my first full-time job. I would rock up to job interviews. I would know nothing about the company, okay? Now, at the end of the day, it's not the be-all and end-all, okay? At the end of the day, a lot of these job interviews for your first full-time jobs, they're very basic. They're just talking about you. They want to know more about yourself as a person and if they can see themselves working with you, okay? So you need to understand very, very quickly, you need to be able to talk about the company. You need to be able to understand the hiring manager, look at them from a personal point of view and understand the vision, okay? I guarantee you, if you do these 3 things here, you will stand out over 99% of other candidates for these level of jobs. And then also take this same principle for the next job and the job after that as you continue to ascend in your career. These are the core things that you need to be remembering for your job interviews, okay? And I'll explain a little bit why, okay? Because as I said, particularly for your first full-time jobs, okay, you're not going to be expected to tell a million stories about your value. You're not going to be expected to talk a lot about, transferable skills. They're not going to expect you to know a lot about these things. But if you can walk into these interviews and when they ask you questions along the lines of like, well, why this role? Why this company? What draws you to being here today? If you're able to actually talk a little bit about, like maybe just like, 30 seconds into the company's history and how it aligns with yourself, or just one or two things you've read about the company or their vision, okay, and how that aligns with you, that's going to be very, very important in standing out, because they're going to look at you and they're going to think, you know what, this guy has a great resume, this guy has great presentation skills, and he's done his research. He knows a thing or two, okay? And that stands out so much more than the candidates around you who are just going, oh yeah, I wanted to apply because I got some interest in the job. Yeah, it looked good, so I thought I would apply for it. And not really knowing anything, okay? So really understanding the company, understanding the core of the company's values, why the company's hiring, the company's vision, okay? Understanding, how the services that they provide aligns with yourself. Being able to talk about all of these things is extremely important, because when they ask you certain questions, you will know. You will know when is the right time to bring in the research that you've done. And once you're able just to talk about it for maybe 2 or 3 sentences, that goes a long way in standing out to a hiring manager. Okay. I also talked about here understanding a little bit more about your hiring manager themselves. At the end of the day, when you're applying for a role with a company, they will always tell you who the interview is with. Okay. It's very important to do some research on that person just to help to build a little bit of rapport as the interview is starting. Okay. You will find little opportunities in your interview to either bring up or to talk about certain things where there is common ground with your hiring manager. You know what I mean? Or something even along the lines of like, let's say, a good example would be, let's say you go in for a job interview and they tell you the interview is with not even hiring manager, but just, some manager in the company. His name's Steve, okay? You look up Steve's LinkedIn. Steve has been with this company for 10 years, and you see how Steve has started in the exact role that you're going for, okay? And you see how over the last decade, he has climbed and he has climbed in his career, okay? And you have seen his ascent, all right? Internally, okay? So what you do there is you make note of that, okay? And then in the interview, they ask you, what's it about this company that's drawn you to applying? You talk about, I'm a big fan of this, I'm a big fan of that. I love the idea of growing with a company, and I've noticed through yourself, Steve, in your own background, as I saw on your LinkedIn, that they encourage this quite a lot. So that is something that motivated me to apply, okay? Because I'm a big fan of growing with the team, and I love the idea of internal growth. And I've noticed that even with yourself, this is something that is encouraged, and this is something that is pushed, and that is something that really attracted me to applying for the position, because I like the idea of growing my career with someone, with a team, and growing together rather than jumping ship every 6 months. So there you go. A little bit of research there. And now Steve feels a lot more connected to you. Steve feels a lot more like, oh, okay, like this guy's done his research and this guy understands what's important to him. And yeah, he's right. We can provide that. So that's a really good fit. And subconsciously, you're putting into his mind that, not only are you fit for the role, but that there is a good match there. There is a good match to be made there. Okay. So little bits of research there. Also saying something along the lines of like, this person's hiring manager has been in your industry for a long time. Maybe go to them, look, I noticed when I saw on your LinkedIn that, you've been in the industry now for X amount of years. What do you enjoy about it so much? Little things like that. By just doing that little bit of extra research on your hiring manager, you're able to build a little bit of extra conversation and able to build a better impression of yourself and get them to drop their guard as well as time goes on, okay? Typically speaking, guys, as a recruiter, we don't really get nervous ahead of interviews. I mean, do I? A little bit still, actually, that's a lie. I do get a little bit nervous in interviews, but one thing that I will say that I think a lot of recruiters can agree with is that recruiters necessarily, they don't get nervous before an interview, but they can easily it can get very overwhelming very quickly. Sometimes you will deal with recruiters who are doing their 8th or 9th interview for the day, okay? They're going to feel flat out. They're going to feel like they're just following the same script, and every interview is just going to feel like the same mundane conversations, okay? If you are able to bring a little bit of light to them and to get them talking a little bit more about their own life and talk about why they enjoy what they do, that lightens them up. That drops their guard. That brightens up their day. And so by just doing that little bit of extra research, you are now able to unlock this whole new side to them, where if you knew nothing about them, this wouldn't have happened, and you would be put on an even playing field with the rest of the other candidates. Okay? So it's very important to do your research. And my last point, ask good questions, okay? When you are going into an interview, this is something I talk a lot about on this channel and with my candidates in general, is when you're going in for an interview, ask questions that are important to you, okay? Don't ask straight away stuff about salary, working from home arrangements, internal growth. Don't ask anything that can be associated with you just being, focused on yourself and being too self-motivated with your work. Don't give them anything to worry about in that perspective, but ask good questions that are important to you about the company. Okay. So for me, when I go in for a job interview, I like to understand, why they're hiring. I like to understand, has this job been open for X amount of weeks? Why has this job been open for so long? What have the other candidates lacked that I could potentially bring? You know what I mean? I like to ask these types of questions. I like to understand, okay, what is it about me specifically that's going to be able to stand out to them? Okay. I like to get them to really understand, what they are looking for in a candidate. Okay. It's not necessarily I like to ask that whole like, what does 6 months time look like in a successful environment, or whatever the question is. I don't like to ask that about that specifically, but I would like to know, what is the exact value that I will be required to add from day one? What is the bottleneck at the, is it bottleneck? I don't know, but whatever the term is, it's like, what is the stop in the process that I'm going to come in and help fix? You know what I mean? What is the one part in the operational flow that is missing that I'm going to come in and help? You know what I mean? I want to understand these things. I want to understand how I am the missing piece of the puzzle. That's very important to me. Okay? So don't just ask vague questions. Don't ask questions that show that you're just asking questions for the sake of it. Think detailed. Think very in depth. Think about questions that are really going to get them thinking, but the more that they think, it's going to help you understand if it's the role for you. Okay? You need to understand as well that yes, they're looking for an ideal candidate, but you are looking for the ideal job environment as well. So it's so important to take that opportunity. Don't think that if this interview goes wrong, you're going to be unemployed for the rest of your life. You're not. Every jobs will come and go. Okay, it's easier to get a job that you hate. You know what I mean? It's so much easier to just make that mistake and join a job that you don't actually want to be in. So it's very important that you ask these questions very early on and understand your value, understand what they're looking for, understanding where the alignment is, and see just if you can actually see yourself doing these things on a day to day. Ask about the day to day life, ask about the management, ask about the culture, ask about the things that are important to you. Because at the end of the day, when you join this job, you don't want to be back in this same process of job hunting in 2-3 months down the track. It's very important you make that right decision. And in order to arrive at that right decision, you need to understand the right information. And in order to get the right information, you need to ask the right questions. So go into these interviews and ask questions that are important to you, that are going to get them thinking, and that are going to be able to get them to answer things that are really important to you, to see if there is that genuine alignment with yourself and the company, to see if you are prepared to go to that next step with them. Okay? I hope you guys got some value from this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you are interested in working with me on a one-to-one level, click the link below for a free consultation. Happy to organize a 30-minute chat to organize or to understand your goals and how we can work together moving forward. I hope you guys enjoyed. Take care. I'll see you guys next time.